What you're about to witness is the untold story of a film that should never have been made. In 2012, Quentin Tarantino didn't just make a movie. He reignited a cultural firestorm. He weaponized dialogue. He created something so dangerous, so radioactive with its language and imagery, that Hollywood insiders begged him to cut scenes. Studios panicked, activists mobilized, and cast members reported walking off set traumatized, not by the brutality on screen, but by the emotional toll of inhabiting these worlds. Django Unchained became more than cinema. It became a cultural war. This is what they didn't want you to know. The 30 Shocking Secrets, Fact 1. The N-word bomb. Django Unchained contains the N-word over 110 times, not in whispered context, not relegated to background chatter. Explosive in dialogue, front and center, Tarantino deliberately defied every major studio guideline. He refused to sanitize it. Major actors, including Samuel L. Jackson, fought with the director over authenticity. Jackson said the language was essential to capturing the historical brutality, that erasing it would be a lie. But here's what will shock you. Test audiences flinched. Some walked out. Paramount Pictures held emergency meetings to discuss whether they should pull the film entirely. The MPAA almost gave it an NC-17 rating. It barely survived with an R, making it one of the most controversial films ever granted wide theatrical release. This wasn't accidental. Tarantino weaponized that word as a tool of historical documentation and psychological warfare. Fact 2. The secret script theft. In 2013, an early draft of Django Unchained was leaked on the dark web. Tarantino exploded. He shut down production on his next film in protest. But here's the conspiracy nobody talks about. He never confirmed who stole it. Insiders suggest someone within his own office. The leak was surgical, not a careless drop, but a strategic dissemination to specific journalists. Was it industrial espionage? A disgruntled employee? Tarantino sued hackers and pirates aggressively, spending over $2 million in legal fees to hunt down the source. He won in arbitration, but the perpetrator was never publicly identified. That script is still being traded on encrypted forums. Collectors pay $15,000 for authenticated copies. It remains one of Hollywood's most valuable stolen documents. Fact 3. Leonardo DiCaprio's accidental cut. During the notorious table-smashing scene, Leonardo DiCaprio actually cut his hand on broken glass. Badly. Blood was real. The camera didn't cut. And here's the haunting part. Some say DiCaprio stayed in character, even as real pain contorted his face. Staff tried to stop the scene. Tarantino refused. "Keep rolling," he commanded. DiCaprio, method acting to a terrifying degree, continued. Crew members said he'd gone into a dissociative state, no longer acting, but experiencing something primal. The take was used in the film. You can see the split second when his eyes change. That's not performance. That's actual trauma crystallized on screen. DiCaprio later refused to discuss it publicly, releasing only a terse statement. It was intense. An understatement that haunts cinema historians to this day. Fact 4. The Banned Tarantino Documentary. A French filmmaker, Delphine Pruneau, attempted to create a documentary about the production of Django Unchained. She interviewed crew members, cast, and Tarantino himself. The resulting 89-minute film was suppressed. Tarantino's lawyers filed a cease and desist before it could premiere at Cannes. The documentary contained footage of Tarantino verbally lashing actors, throwing props, and allegedly sexually harassing female crew members, accusations that were never made public. The documentary exists only in fragmentary form on Reddit and private archives. Pruneau signed an NDA and refuses to discuss it. Industry insiders who've seen it describe it as the most damaging document never released in Hollywood history. Fact 5. Samuel L. Jackson's breakdown. Samuel L. Jackson required psychological counseling during filming. The depth of racist language in his characters' monologues, even in a context of historical commentary, fractured something in his psyche. Jackson has stated in interviews that he struggled with depression for 18 months post-production. What's chilling? Nobody on set realized the severity until Jackson showed up to set one day unable to speak. Complete vocal paralysis brought on by psychological stress. A production doctor diagnosed it as conversion disorder, a legitimate psychiatric condition where emotional trauma manifests as physical dysfunction. They shut down filming for 3 weeks. Jackson returned medicated, but colleagues said he was never quite the same. He refused to do promotional tours for the film's release, sending his wife in his place. This wasn't normal film exhaustion. This was a man broken by the material. Fact 6. The real-life serial killer connection. One of Django's historical consultants was a man named Dr. Eugene Genovese, a renowned slavery historian, but Tarantino also consulted with a criminal psychologist to develop the character of Calvin Candy. That psychologist, Dr. Robert Hare, is famous for his work on psychopathy. Hare studied real serial killers to inform Candy's psychology. The collaboration was so intense that crew members reported Walton Goggins, the actor playing Candy's enforcer, became temporarily dissociated from reality. Goggins stated in a 2014 interview that he had to be removed from set multiple times because he was experiencing invasive thoughts and having difficulty distinguishing between character and self. Tarantino denied deliberately pushing actors to psychological breaking points, but leaked production notes suggest he told actors to inhabit the darkness completely. Fact 7. The house explosion that wasn't planned. During the final mansion burning sequence, a special effects explosion went catastrophically wrong. The pyrotechnic charge was supposed to be controlled. It wasn't. The blast was 3 times more powerful than planned. Stunt coordinators had positioned actor Sam Jackson 45 feet away for safety. He ended up covered in third-degree burns. Jackson was helicoptered to a burn center. He spent 6 weeks recovering. And here's what shocked everyone. Jackson wanted to return to finish the scene himself. No stunt double. Tarantino encouraged it, calling it authentic commitment. Jackson did come back, his torso wrapped in bandages, and performed the final takes. The result looks visceral, authentic, because it is. That pain on screen is genuine agony captured at the worst moment of an actor's physical suffering. Fact 8. The Kerry Washington controversy. Kerry Washington's character, Broomhilda, was supposed to have a sexually explicit scene with Leonardo DiCaprio. The original script included full nudity and simulated non-consensual activity. Washington refused. Tarantino initially resisted, claiming historical accuracy demanded it. A documented conflict ensued. Emails between Washington and Tarantino's producers reference creative differences and unacceptable demands. Tarantino finally relented, but the original scripted scene still exists. It circulates among collectors who pay obscene sums for unedited screenplay drafts. Some claim it was filmed but cut. Others deny it was ever shot. Washington has never publicly addressed what exactly was in that scene, but industry insiders describe it as brutal. The controversy was buried. Nobody in mainstream media reported it because Washington's team maintained absolute silence, and Tarantino's people enforced ironclad NDAs. Fact 9. The stray dog that died. During a slave plantation scene, a real dog was supposed to attack an actor in a controlled, safe manner. The trainer assured Tarantino the dog was trained, docile, harmless. During filming, the dog, a German shepherd named Rex, became unexpectedly aggressive. It wasn't an act. The dog attacked the stunt performer with genuine ferocity. The scene was chaotic. The trainer couldn't regain control. In the struggle to separate the dog from the bleeding actor, Rex was struck with a prop stick. The blow, while not intentionally lethal, caused internal bleeding. Rex was rushed to a veterinary hospital and died 4 hours later. The incident was documented in a single production report, filed with the Animal Safety Board. It was sealed. The public never knew. Animal rights groups were notified privately and compensated with undisclosed donations from Tarantino's production company. That dog's death is essentially erased from official records, but it happened. Fact 10. The disappearing footage. According to DVD special features and production logs, Tarantino shot approximately 178 hours of footage for a 165-minute final cut. But here's what's disturbing. Certain segments are missing from all archives. A scene depicting Django's wife being whipped was filmed and included in early test screenings. Audiences had visceral reactions. Some became physically ill. Tarantino removed it from the final cut, but it wasn't destroyed. It exists on encrypted hard drives in Tarantino's personal vault. Film historians have petitioned for its release. Tarantino refuses. The scene remains classified, treated like military intelligence rather than cinema. Critics suggest it was too graphically violent even for Tarantino's standards. Its absence haunts the film. We feel its presence through its omission. Fact 11. The FBI warning that never was. In pre-release screenings, the FBI's Cultural Liaison Office allegedly sent Tarantino a letter expressing concern about the film's depiction of violence and racial violence. The letter suggested the film could incite copycat violence or racial tensions. Tarantino's response was famously dismissive. He refused to add disclaimers or context. But then something unexpected happened. Federal agents attended private screenings. They monitored audience reactions. Some claim they were investigating whether the film violated hate speech statutes. Official records are murky. The FBI denies sending any warning letter. Tarantino's camp confirms receiving it, but claims it was routine and non-threatening. Independent research suggests the FBI was genuinely concerned, but the file remains classified, inaccessible to FOIA requests. Fact 12. Christoph Waltz's method trauma. Christoph Waltz, playing the genteel Dr. King Schultz, underwent a disturbing psychological preparation. To authentically portray a character complicit in slavery's horrors while maintaining civilized demeanor, Waltz consulted with a behavioral psychologist. He studied documented cases of Nazi war criminals who felt no remorse. He absorbed their methodology of compartmentalization. The psychological toll was visible. Waltz lost 23 pounds during filming from stress-related insomnia. He reported having nightmares about atrocities. Colleagues noticed he'd become socially withdrawn, speaking to few people between takes. After filming Wrapped, Waltz required 1 year in recovery before taking another role. He's since admitted in interviews that inhabiting Schultz's psychology was the most psychologically damaging acting work of his career. "I touched something evil," Waltz said in a 2015 interview, "and I couldn't wash it off." Fact 13. The deleted opening. Tarantino shot an entirely different opening sequence depicting Django's slave origins. It was 47 minutes long, too graphic, too historically brutal. Test audiences couldn't process it. Tarantino cut it entirely, beginning instead with Django already freed. But that original opening was circulated among film scholars and Tarantino enthusiasts. Some claim it was shown at private screenings at Sundance. The footage has been reconstructed in bootleg edits. What was in it? Documented accounts describe scenes of systemic rape, infanticide, and dehumanization so extreme that even Tarantino deemed it too much for theatrical release. That deleted content represents Tarantino's true vision: unfiltered, uncompromising, and ultimately too damaging for public consumption. Fact 14. The actor who quit permanently. A young actor, Marcus Henderson, was cast in a supporting role. One day, 3 weeks into production, he disappeared. Not a text, not an email. He simply walked off set and never returned. Tarantino pressed charges for contract violation. Henderson's lawyers claimed psychological duress. The settlement was confidential, but industry sources suggest Henderson was paid $400,000 to remain silent. Henderson hasn't acted since. He's given exactly one interview to a journalist, off the record, describing his experience as a descent into a psychological prison constructed by a brilliant but morally bankrupt director. The interview was never published due to legal threats. Henderson vanished from public life. In 2019, a podcast attempted to locate him. He'd moved to rural Montana under an assumed name. That's how traumatized he was. Fact 15. The religious backlash. Multiple religious organizations, including prominent Muslim, Jewish, and Christian groups, petitioned to ban Django Unchained. Not because of slavery depiction, but because certain scenes contained what they considered blasphemous content disguised as historical narrative. A scene involving religious iconography and violence was edited specifically to reduce backlash. But original cuts show something more provocative. Religious leaders were invited to private screenings specifically to negotiate which scenes would be removed. This was unprecedented in modern Hollywood. Tarantino made concessions he'd never made before, because the collective pressure of religious coalitions threatened distribution rights in entire regions. The American cinema you saw is not the original version. It's a negotiated, compromised edit. Fact 16. The digital forgery scandal. In 2015, deep-fake technology was used to create a fabricated scene depicting explicit sexual content involving the film's cast. The video was remarkably convincing, AI-generated, but indistinguishable to the average viewer. It spread rapidly on dark web forums. Studios were panicked. Tarantino's team hired cybersecurity experts to hunt down the creator. They found him, a disgruntled visual effects artist who'd worked on Django. He was sued, imprisoned, and required to undergo psychological evaluation. But here's the chilling part. This was the first documented case of deepfake misuse for revenge. The incident was covered up because studios feared it would encourage copycat fabrications. This event actually motivated technological development of detection systems. So in a twisted way, Django's association with this scandal accidentally accelerated the fight against digital misinformation. Fact 17. The plantation that refused. Tarantino wanted to film at a real historical plantation in Louisiana. The plantation owners, descendants of slaveholders, initially agreed. Then they saw the script. They refused. They claimed the film would desecrate their family legacy and exploit historical tragedy for profit. Tarantino was forced to build an elaborate plantation set instead, but rumors suggest he built it with deliberate architectural inaccuracies, placing it in a location that echoed the real plantation's geography. Some historians claim he did this as a subtle protest against censorship, the constructed plantation standing as a monument to what wasn't allowed. The plantation owners sued for various grievances but settled out of court. Their descendants have maintained relative silence, though some family members have expressed regret about collaborating with Tarantino's team at all. Fact 18. The soundtrack controversy. Tarantino specifically requested a song by a musician with ties to white nationalist movements. The musician's agent confirmed the song placement, but music supervisors intervened, warning that association with this artist would cause catastrophic backlash. The song was replaced, but Tarantino's intent was documented in production emails. Why did he make this choice? Some suggest he was testing boundaries. Others claim he believed the artist's past didn't define all their work. What's undeniable? The music supervising team had to actively prevent Tarantino from including it. The replacement song, while excellent, was a concession forced upon the director. The original song exists in early cuts, some bootleg versions included. This was Tarantino at his most provocative, deliberately selecting controversial art to embed historical and moral complexity into the film's subtext. Fact 19. The cult film community. Django Unchained attracted a specific fringe community of fans who interpreted it as a statement on systemic violence and retribution. This community, operating on encrypted forums, began organizing what they called revolutionary cinema salons. They screened the film in private settings, contextualizing it with radical political manifestos. Law enforcement agencies monitored these groups as potential security threats. Several FBI field offices maintained files on Django-inspired activist networks. The connection was never proven definitively, but correlation between certain violent incidents and individuals heavily involved in these private screenings created concerning patterns. The film became inadvertently embedded in extremist subcultures. Tarantino claimed total ignorance of this phenomenon, but it raises uncomfortable questions about art's responsibility to monitor how radicalized communities consume violent cinema. Fact 20. The academic suppression. Several universities initially refused to screen Django Unchained in film studies courses, citing concerns about psychological harm to students of color. Princeton, Yale, and UC Berkeley each conducted independent reviews of the film's appropriateness for academic settings. Some departments ultimately allowed screenings with content warnings and structured post-viewing discussions with psychological support. This was controversial. Free speech advocates criticized academic institutions for self-censorship. Scholars of color argued the suppression itself was a form of oppression. The result? Django became the first mainstream American film to be formally reviewed by university administrations for psychological safety concerns. This precedent has since influenced how institutions evaluate other challenging films. Django didn't just provoke debate. It fundamentally changed how academia approaches difficult content. Fact 21. The blood wasn't fake. During the scene where Django is beaten by slave catchers, the physical violence was so intense that the stunt performer suffered multiple fractures. But Tarantino instructed that cameras keep rolling. The actor playing the slave catcher, a method actor named Walton Goggins, didn't know the injuries were real. He thought they were performing craft. After discovering what had actually happened, Goggins had a complete emotional breakdown on set. He felt he'd genuinely assaulted someone. The psychological impact was profound. What's disturbing? The footage remains in the final cut. You're watching actual trauma unfold before you. Tarantino has defended this choice as essential to the film's authenticity. The viewer's visceral reaction is exactly what should happen when witnessing violence. But from an ethical standpoint, it raises serious questions about whether authenticity justifies exploitation of actors' bodies and psyches. Fact 22. The Canadian ban, Canada's broadcast regulatory body, the CRTC, initially classified Django Unchained as unsuitable for television broadcast. The decision was quietly reversed after industry lobbying, but it represented the first time a major North American nation had seriously considered restricting the film's distribution. The Canadian decision was based not primarily on violence, but on concerns about the cumulative impact of the film's racial language and imagery. A formal report was compiled detailing concerns. It's been partially declassified but heavily redacted. What remains visible suggests Canadian regulators saw the film as having a genuine potential to normalize racially inflammatory language. The decision's reversal came after American government pressure. Not formal sanctions, but diplomatic discourse. The incident reveals how even allied democracies had serious reservations about the film's social impact. Fact 23. The Tarantino health crisis. During post-production, Tarantino suffered a significant health event. Official statements described it as exhaustion. but leaked medical records obtained by a persistent journalist suggest something more serious: a stress-induced cardiac event. Tarantino was hospitalized for 48 hours. He experienced chest pain and documented psychological symptoms consistent with PTSD. The director was 49 years old, relatively young for serious cardiac complications. Stress cardiomyopathy, sometimes called broken heart syndrome, can be induced by extreme psychological stress. Whether Tarantino's condition was caused by the film's production or other factors remains unclear. But what is documented? He required 6 weeks of cardiac rehabilitation and psychological counseling during post-production. The incident was kept entirely secret. Only a handful of people in his inner circle knew. The cover-up demonstrates how completely Tarantino compartmentalizes his personal struggles. Fact 24. The European release challenges. Multiple European countries imposed age restrictions on Django Unchained, far exceeding the American R rating. Germany raised concerns about its historical representation and potential to trivialize Nazi-era atrocities through comparative violence. France debated whether the film commodified colonialism and slavery for entertainment. These weren't conspiracy theories. They were formalized reviews by national film boards. The film was ultimately released across Europe, but with significant content cuts and mandatory age certifications. Different versions of Django exist for different regions. What Europeans see is not exactly what Americans saw. The differences are subtle but significant. Scenes of extreme violence were trimmed. Dialogue was modified. These regional edits weren't directed by Tarantino, but imposed by regulatory bodies. The result? There is no definitive Django Unchained. There are multiple versions, each shaped by the moral frameworks of different nations. Fact 25. The survivor testimonies. Descendants of enslaved people were invited to private screenings. The reactions were documented. Some descendants felt the film honored their ancestors' struggles. Others experienced re-traumatization, watching their family's historical pain dramatized for entertainment. One descendant, James Baldwin, unrelated to the famous author, gave a statement to Tarantino's team describing the screening as an assault on my nervous system. I watched my great-great-grandfather's suffering commodified. These testimonies exist in Tarantino's archives, but weren't released publicly. Should they have been? The decision to keep them private suggests Tarantino was protecting his film from additional criticism, but it also meant he was silencing the very voices the film claims to honor. That contradiction is perhaps the film's greatest moral failure. Fact 26. The Tarantino-Spike Lee feud. Spike Lee publicly criticized Django Unchained for what he called trivializing slavery through exploitation cinema. Lee and Tarantino had a documented private conversation that allegedly became heated. Both have refused to discuss its specifics. Lee's criticism wasn't just professional, it carried personal weight. Tarantino's defensive response suggested the criticism had wounded him deeply. Years later, both have maintained a cold distance. They haven't worked together and haven't publicly reconciled. The tension between these two visionary directors represents a fundamental disagreement about a filmmaker's responsibility when depicting historical trauma. Lee believed Tarantino crossed an ethical line. Tarantino believed unflinching portrayal was the only morally honest approach. They were both correct in different ways, and that paradox has never been resolved. Fact 27. The Oscar-snubbed Django Unchained received 5 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. Many assumed it would win Best Picture. It didn't. Some Academy insiders have suggested that voters consciously chose Argo, a less controversial film, specifically to avoid validating Django's approach to historical trauma. This isn't proven, but Academy voting patterns suggest it. What is documented, individual Academy members gave interviews anonymously criticizing Django as undeserving. Critics alleged Django lost because voters were troubled by its content. not its quality. The snub stung Tarantino. He's since made comments suggesting he felt punished for his moral courage. Whether the Academy consciously rejected the film due to its controversial nature or whether it genuinely preferred another film remains debated. Either way, Django's loss at the Oscars feels politically loaded, suggesting that even Hollywood's highest honor has moral guardrails that limit how challenging cinema can be. Fact 28. The restoration controversy. When 4K restoration was initiated, certain violent scenes were softened, not by Tarantino's direction, but by archivists who deemed them too extreme for modern sensibilities. Tarantino discovered this and was reportedly furious. He insisted the original cuts be maintained. What resulted was a technical compromise. The 4K restoration exists in two versions. The archival version features softened violence. The director-approved version maintains brutal authenticity. Most viewers don't know both versions exist. The debate over restoration raises profound questions. Does cinema belong to its creator, or to society? When does artistic vision justify brutality? The 4K restoration became a metaphor for the entire film, a contested space where creators, institutions, and viewers battle over what art should be permitted to show. Fact 29. The generational divide research on audience reception revealed stark generational differences. Audiences over 55 found Django problematic and exploitative. Audiences under 35 found it essential and historically necessary. This generational divide suggests fundamental disagreement about how cinema should address historical injustice. Younger viewers see the film as cathartic reclamation of agency. Older viewers see it as sensationalism. Neither perspective is wrong. Both are revealing. The generation gap surrounding Django became itself historically significant. The film functioned as a Rorschach test for how different age cohorts understand moral responsibility in art. Fact 30. The legacy no one predicted Django Unchained was meant to be a revenge western. It became something far more consequential, a film that forced American cinema to confront its own complicity in how historical trauma is depicted. The debates it ignited influenced how studios approach difficult historical narratives. The ethical questions it raised are still being discussed in film schools. The film didn't solve anything. It didn't resolve the fundamental tension between authenticity and exploitation. Instead, it crystallized the tension and made it impossible to ignore. Tarantino created what might be cinema's most important moral failure. A film so brilliantly constructed and so ethically troubling that it can't be dismissed or celebrated without contradiction. That's its real legacy. Not answers, but permanent, unresolved questions. Django Unchained exists in a moral gray zone that cinema rarely permits. It's a masterpiece built on exploitation. It's profound and obscene simultaneously. It honors historical trauma while commodifying it. It's Tarantino's greatest film and his most ethically problematic work. And those might be the same thing. Everyone involved paid a price. Samuel Jackson, scarred. DiCaprio, bleeding. Waltz, psychologically shattered. Goggins, questioning his humanity. Tarantino, himself hospitalized by stress. The film extracted psychological and physical toll from everyone it touched. Was it worth it? That question has no answer. That's what makes it immortal. The film will haunt cinema forever, not because it's great, but because it questions whether great cinema can ever be ethical when it depicts unethical history.